Well. Who expected this one? Not us, although it does look like it, because here we are doing a podcast seconds after or minutes after Jhon Duran has signed a new contract at Aston Villa. I'm your host, Dan Rolinson, joined by John Townley for an impromptu live episode of the Claret and Blue podcast to share our instant reaction, partly because it's exciting news, John. Secondly, though, we were literally about to press record on a Q&A that we were going to film, which is coming out tomorrow. And there were about 3 questions in there about Jhon Duran. How do we keep him happy? Can we tie him down to a new contract? And we were about to have that discussion. So we were sat down to record anyway. So we thought, you know what? Let's do the Jhon Duran discussion as a live stream. Let's hop on the news quickly and get through that now. Less things to talk about in the Q&A, John. That's one bonus.
Yeah, I'd love to say that we've jumped on because of the news, but probably isn't the case. It's big news. I mean, Jhon Duran is one of the most exciting strikers in world football at the moment, and we've just locked him down for more years. I think 2030 is the length of his contract now, which is an additional 2 years on what was his previous deal. But obviously, Duran, like Morgan Rogers and some other players in the squad, are obviously lower earners than the members who are making big impacts in the team. So yeah, fully deserved of a new deal. And as we'll get on to, Dan, it's obviously one that I don't know about a statement, but it tells there's lots of other interesting clubs, 40 clubs, Damian said that, had approached Villa about the situation. All of those teams are now thinking, oh, okay, well, that's just bumped up tens of more millions of pounds onto Duran's valuation, and it probably halves that number a little bit more as well. So yeah, there's still going to be interest in the player, but of course Villa are now in a really strong position to bat away any interest. Next summer, again, what I would say from the very start is that we don't know what situation Villa will be in regarding who they want to bring in, and does that mean something has to happen in terms of outgoings? We don't know that for sure yet. But Duran signing a new deal, I think, tells everybody that he's not going to be going anywhere anytime soon, which is a major positive, because at the age of 20, what he's showing at the moment is remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, it's massive news. I'm surprised how many people are watching live on a Monday morning saying like this is the best news to start a new week, and it does feel like that. I mean, contracts are good news in football regardless, aren't they? The way that football works these days in terms of a business perspective. We either get to keep Jhon Duran, who is a very promising, one of the most promising forwards in world football at the moment, who is contributing not just goals but match-winning goals as well. We get to keep him for a longer time, which is one great bonus. Or if he is to leave next summer, the year after, whatever it is, if there is interest and he still wants to go, Villa get a bigger transfer fee because he's tied down to a longer contract. Like a new contract in this day and age, in terms of like business and the financial aspect being so big, it's just a win-win all round, isn't it? It's massive. Yeah,
precisely that. And before comments kind of start coming in and saying, "Oh, you're trying to sell him already," that isn't the point. We've already heard from Monchi saying that I don't have the quote to hand, but it's not about who you sell; it's about how well you buy, and that's kind of the key thing in the world of PSR, which everybody hates PSR, right? Especially us Villa fans. But to have that protection around your players, that firstly, this is a statement that Duran isn't going to be sold, but if there's again, an incredible amount of interest because he scores 15 goals from the bench this season, which would be obviously incredible. Why would Villa not just slap £100 million on him? Do you know what I mean?
15 doesn't feel like a lot when you say it like that, does it? The start that he's had 15 goals, that feels like he's going to have a
well, I know it is mad. Well, 15 in terms of off the bench, that would be incredible.
Okay,
but he is capable of doing that, considering what has he done? I think it's 4 goals off the bench in the Premier League so far in 7 games. So it's on his way to doing that. But yeah, it's a statement because those other top clubs around the world are now having to kind of rein in their interest a little bit, I suppose, because this isn't anymore a player who's on, a lower salary, which is very good for those teams. And again, in the world of PSR, wages do have a big contribution to clubs' accounts. So, yeah, all round really good business, but also we've got a player here who we all know is incredibly talented for his age, and that is more than capable of leading the line for most Premier League clubs. And luckily enough, we have him as a key player, but also a player who's almost a bench player, really, isn't he? So yeah, Emery obviously wants to play him and Watkins up front moving forward, he'll have to find space in his structure to do that. I'm not too sure that he can, if I'm being perfectly honest. But I think, to be honest, I think the big thing here is that Duran is committing himself to the club. That's the key point for me. He's happy to extend his contract. I would not have been surprised to have seen something where, Villa have offered him deal. This, by the way, I'm not saying this has happened, but I wouldn't have been surprised if Duran had turned down offers, this one and then other ones, to try and get more money or whatever it may be, because he knows he's so good and he knows that he can be one of the best, if not the best striker in the world. That's his mentality. So I'm just glad that he's accepted whatever offer Villa have given him, and he's committed to Unai Emery's plan, because 3 months ago that didn't look like the case at all. He obviously wanted to leave the club, so something has obviously changed in his mentality or his mindset, even, to think, actually, this is the best place for me. What that is, we don't know exactly. Obviously, John McGinn's spoken about it as well. Morgan Rogers said he's come back like a different animal. So yeah, I'm just glad that he's happy and is settled, because that is the key thing. If Duran was scoring goals, but he was still kind of kicking up a fuss and wanted to leave in January again, then it's almost like you kind of just wash your hands with the situation and just sell the players unhappy. But that isn't the case. Instead, he's kind of, this is like a 180 situation. Sorry, he's completely changed his outlook on his future at Villa.
I like the idea of a 190 turnaround instead of
190.
a 180. Just a little bit more than a 180.
Probably, isn't it?
We'll talk about keeping Jhon Duran happy in a second in terms of his more long-term future. Yeah. Just touching on what you said there about like how things have changed since the summer. We obviously did the podcast that I refer back to a couple of times, well, pretty much every time he scores, about like, does he have a future at Villa? And you've obviously been very don't say defensive of Duran, but you've fought his corner, I suppose, in terms of like backing his ability. And I actually had a couple of people come up to me at Villa Park yesterday saying like about he'd scored on Wednesday night and whatever. And like, well, fair play to John. Like he's always backed him. Like, and I was like, yeah, there was me going, oh, he's average. Which, to be fair, as I said at the time, I felt that was because of his attitude, like in his mentality. That yes, he might have all the ability in the world, but if he's not right up here, he's not going to fulfil it, making him average. That was my point. I've obviously made that myself look very silly, or he's made me look very silly within a matter of weeks into the season by popping up with so many important goals. But the facts remain of how much has changed since July, June, August, or he wants to leave. Like that is not a surprise to anybody. He wanted to go. We had all the West Ham stuff on Instagram. Like it was all, there were a lot of fans who were going, right, if West Ham give us another 5 million, yeah, fine. 40 million, 45, yeah, whatever. Let him go. Like, let's just, like you say, wash our hands of it. And I don't think many people would have been that bothered at that time. And you fast forward to now, and back then I would have never have envisaged a new contract. I'd have just thought, well, he's got a contract to when, I don't know, 27 or 26 or whatever. At some point, he's just going to go, right, this isn't for me. I'm not playing. I'm better than that. I'll just go. I'll run my contract down another year and I'll go. To see him in the pictures that we've seen today with a massive grin on his face, to see him playing with a smile on his face, to see him scoring goals and sitting there kind of high-fiving Unai Emery and signing a contract in the first week of October. If you just showed us that in June when we were sat in the office going, oh, who is this guy? Who do you think he is? He's got to go and apologise to Emery. How's he going to repair his relationship with the fans? Like, it's mad. The turnaround is crazy.
Yeah, and by the way, this is a masterclass from Unai Emery in man management, and from Monchi, Damian, the football instructor that we have. They could have easily as they were disrespected by Duran in terms of the Irons gesture, and so were the players, so were the fans. I think that was quite apparent. But again, they are the people who are spending time with Duran day to day for the past or since January 2023, and they know about his attitude. They know, when I say attitude, I don't mean that in a negative way. Everyone has an attitude. About his mentality, as I said earlier, he's come into a new culture, a completely new environment. He's 20 years old, for crying out loud. He joined us when he was 18, I think. This was never going to be a smooth transition for Duran. And everything that we've heard from his former managers, former coaches, he's quite a shy individual, and it kind of takes a little bit of time for him to trust people, essentially. And now he does. So we've basically seen that happen, and I'm just glad that hopefully he now it looks like he does anyway. He is settled and he is happy to continue learning off Emery, but also I think this is much more than Emery just being a coach. He, I imagine, would almost be like, not like a father figure, but in a way that you get the idea that if Duran's done something wrong, he's probably in Emery's office, and Emery probably isn't blasting him, but he's setting it right to say, this is what you're doing wrong here. Very simple terms, right? But then in the media, Emery isn't going to blast Duran because that is not the best thing to manage this situation. Obviously, when he was going to be asked about the Irons gesture and other things, Emery isn't going to be saying, yeah, it's a joke. I feel disrespected. He might be saying that in front of Duran face to face in a room together, but then doing it in front of the media, that's just not how you deal with the situation. And all of Emery's experience, in my opinion, has kind of led to this outcome, essentially, where we now have a player who is fully committed and his banging in goals left, right and centre is looking like the talent that we thought we had signed. So yeah, it's a huge contrast from even the last game, the last season, when he was sulking a little bit on the pitch when Watkins wouldn't give him the ball against Palace, because Watkins wanted his 20th goal of the season, which was basically the main reason why we even played that match. But Duran, in that moment, was probably thinking, I want to have a move now. I want to be the main guy somewhere else. And obviously, yeah, something big has changed. He's realised what an opportunity he has. And you were saying earlier, Dan, about, firstly, my big thing about Duran was just the talent, what I was seeing on the pitch. There was clearly a lot of qualities to work with there. But you were still right about his mentality. And if he doesn't have that, then what he has on the pitch in terms of his attributes, whatever, they won't. It's not a marriage that works. We've seen that before with other players. So I'm just glad that he's kind of switched on a little bit. And I said myself that, while he has all the talent in the world, if he doesn't kind of mature essentially and grow up, then Villa can't wait for him, because they are a top 4 team. They are a Champions League team. They don't need to wait for a player, if they didn't feel it was necessary anyway, to become what they hope he would be. For example, if Duran came back at Bodymore and was sulking and wasn't really entertaining the idea of staying, Villa probably would have sold him in the end in January or even next summer, because, again, it's not a problem that they have to fix, and they would have still got good money anyway. But, thankfully that isn't the case, and he's knuckled down, and he's shown all the right attitude to, get to where he is now. And that kind of broken relationship with the fans has been fixed. And I'm just glad that we have a situation where we can all kind of realise, again, this is a 20-year-old kid who's come from Colombia, doesn't know anything about the English culture or lack of, and it's difficult for him. It's always going to be difficult for him. It's never going to be easy. It's a good thing that we haven't kind of just jumped on him after the season. When the season started. That goal against West Ham probably helped, to be honest with you. But it's all a happy place now.
Yeah, there's a couple of people in the comments talking about like kind of chaotic Jhon Duran or the chaos that he brings, and that's we coined that last season, didn't we, with the substitution of Zaniolo and Duran being like the chaos twins coming on and just doing something no one really knows, being a bit unpredictable. And that's still true to an extent, but I think last year that tag was more given to Jhon Duran will come on and maybe elbow somebody or leave a leg on somebody and get a yellow card and fire one over the bar from 35 yards and kind of just being unpredictable in the nature of just like there's something there, but he's not quite refined it yet. And that's still the case to an extent, but obviously he's managed to kind of polish his game up a little bit more so this season and actually score a couple of goals and be less chaotic in terms of being rash or getting a yellow card every single appearance or whatever. Like he's kind of toned that down a little bit, I think, off the top of my head anyway.
Stop with it. I've just realised what you've done with my name.
Well, I was going to come to that in a second. Yeah, there's other YouTube comments saying, why is John Townley's name spelled incorrectly? Like it's a typo. It's obviously intentional. Jon for those that are watching. I've changed his name tag. Another thing very quickly, we are doing this live, as we said, so a bit all over the place. A tweet from Damian Vidagani a couple of minutes ago. Securing our Colombian diamond is what he said. Jhon Duran 2030. Well deserved and on the right track. Now is the time to stay humble, work even harder and keep the focus, which is like everything that is what we want from Duran, isn't it? Yes, you've clearly got the ability. You're clearly talented. You can bang one in from 35 yards. You can lob one of the best goalkeepers in the world in a massive high pressure fixture in the Champions League. But if you don't keep your head down, if you don't keep focused, if you don't keep learning from one of the best coaches in world football, this will all be kind of gone in a puff of smoke, and you'll be off to West Ham in a couple of years and kind of not doing anything. And I mean that in a disrespectful way of like, that'd be a downgrade. If you keep your head down and keep working, Jhon Duran, if you're watching, you can become one of the best in the world, and he will know that as well.
Yeah, and the kind of the Mr. Burns gif when it's like, you're here forever. It's not quite like that, but now he knows where he stands for the next, I don't know, let's call it 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Again, I know he's got a contract to 2030, but things happen in football. But he's not going to be leaving in January, put it that way. So he knows he's settled now. He has no other option but to go to Bodymoor Heath and work hard and listen to Unai Emery. And again, he's happy to do that because he's put pen to paper on a new deal. He could have easily rejected that deal and said, no, I want to hold out to go to Chelsea, because they'd have probably paid him even more than what we are, and giving him a 25-year contract or wherever they pay players and on their contract lengths as well. But yeah, this is key for me because he's firstly happy, but also he knows exactly where he stands, and that's crucial, because the reason why he was so unsettled was because there was interest elsewhere, and because he wasn't getting the kind of the rub of the green in the squad and wasn't quite working for him. Again, something's changed, different things have changed even, and then here we are. We have Duran until 2030, which is great news for everyone. I've said it before, we have the two best strikers in our, how do I word this? No other club has a better strike partnership than Aston Villa, and I stand by that.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking about keeping him happy, as I said, we were literally sitting down to record a Q&A, and one of the questions was about, like, can this continue for Jhon Duran in terms of just coming off the bench? Like, you're scoring goals at some point, every player's going to say, I'm worthy of a start here. But that's instead of Watkins or alongside him. At some point, he's well within his rights to knock on Emery's door and say, come on, man, like, I'm scoring goal after goal here. You have to start me.
Yeah, and he will, yeah.
And how do you keep him happy? Can we tie him down to a long-term contract? Is that something we can do? Honestly, if this episode was recorded an hour earlier, that is the conversation we'd have had, and it would have been immediately out of date, because obviously he's signed the contract now. But how do you keep him happy? Let's face it, no one is expecting him to stay till 2030. Not many footballers see out a contract of that length, another 6 years. Like, I'd be surprised to see Jhon Duran have an 8-year career at Aston Villa. You never know, obviously, but largely speaking, that doesn't happen. Let's say he's here, as you said, for the next 2 seasons. How do you keep him happy during that time if he's still only coming off the bench? Like, what's the solution long term? What have Emery and the team sold him basically to get him to sign this deal?
Yeah, there's a couple of things with this. Firstly, he's obviously going to be starting games sooner rather than later with Ollie Watkins, because Ollie Watkins is not going to be dropped, obviously. I do question that a little bit because I'm not too sure how it works for us. For example, when we played United yesterday and they were both playing up front, I just felt like we were missing something in the middle of the pitch, and maybe that's because Onana wasn't playing and different things. I don't know. I need to kind of see it to believe it, really. I think Duran's impact off the bench has been fantastic, obviously, but I do think that's because also he is the main man and the structure around him enables him to have chances, essentially. But
some of that will come with time as well. I think there was one occasion during the game yesterday where, and there's only one thing, I don't know if you remember because it was so minor, but a ball came up towards the striker area and neither of them went to compete for it, and they kind of like, who should have gone for that? And that will come with time, but you know what I mean? Like, they're both kind of doing the same role and they're not quite sure who does what at the moment.
Yeah, and there was also the kind of defensive element as well. You'd have Duran and Watkins obviously pinning the centre-backs back, but then there's like a gaping hole between Tielemans and Barkley or whoever was on the pitch at the time. And you just thought, you probably want Rodgers there, because if anyone's going to collect the ball and run at a player, it's him. And that's what we needed in that moment. But anyway, that's kind of by the by. Unai is one of the best tacticians in European football, so I'll trust him to kind of nail that. But then, more kind of looking long term, not trying to paint a negative here, but obviously Watkins, and I know footballers don't just retire at the age of 30. He'll be 30 next season, I think, next December next year. Obviously, there's a situation where he's been at the club for many years now. Will he stay at Villa, until he's 32, 33? I don't know. But obviously, as you said earlier, Dan, footballers don't tend to stay at clubs for more than 4 or 5 years. So potentially we could see a situation where if Watkins was to go in the next 2-3 years, which is completely like reasonable, because again, you might see that with other players. It just doesn't happen in football that players stay for more than 6 years. I think McGinn is that player for us now, and it feels like he's been here for forever. So maybe there's a situation where he would become the number 9, eventually. I think that's not something that Villa definitely wouldn't have promised him, but I think we're all aware that this is a player who can start for anyone if he's continuing in the progression that he's going at. He could probably play for most teams in world football in like 2 or 3 years' time. So there is that clear objective for him to be the main man. He will be that at Villa, I'm sure, in the next few years if he continues as he's going. What that means for the rest of the team, I don't know. If Ollie Watkins continues to score 15 to 20 goals every season, and he wants to stay, he will stay and we will play 2 up front for the next 10 years or whatever it may be. But for Duran, this is kind of like a solo mission almost of, if he just continues to play well, he will get, he has got the number 9 shirt, but he will have that number 9 slot. And he will be one of the first names on the team sheet for many, many years to come. And that's all he has to focus on. Everything else will sort itself out. It's up to Emery to fit the pieces together. Again, if Watkins continues to impress and continues to bang goals in for Villa until he's 35, then they'll both be playing up front. So, yeah. But for Duran himself to be starting games, he just needs to continue as he's going, because Emery is clearly kind of sold by the idea of playing them both. I don't think anyone really expected him to be at this level so quickly this season, which has probably thrown Emery's structure a little bit, because in pre-season it wasn't the plan to be playing 2 up front by December, which could be the case now. So in a weird way, that kind of concerns me a little bit, because after pre-season, you had a case of Constant was going to be playing centre-back. Carlos might have gone. Geertruida was going to come in. That didn't happen. So now we're kind of fixing that issue. And then I don't want to call it an issue. It's a good headache, but also one that Emery will have to fix, and is probably going to spend this international break trying to work out where those pieces fit together.
But very, very exciting overall. And I'm going to call this bonus podcast a day there, because we've got a Q&A to record and we're eating into that time at the moment. So, John, thank you very much for jumping on. JHON Townley, thank you for joining me for this live reaction to the Jhon Duran contract news. Thanks everyone who watched along live at 11:30 on a Monday morning. 300 of you here on the live stream, so thank you for joining us. If you're listening to this on Catch Up or you're watching on Catch Up, leave a comment down below and share your thoughts on the news as well. Lots of questions about a release clause. We don't know. I won't be surprised, but we don't know. So let's leave that there. Right, thanks everyone for watching or listening, and we'll see you for the Q&A tomorrow.